Hey Jay, it looks like you're on. Oh, that's perfect. That's super duper clear. That looks great. I can't hear your audio for some reason, but this looks awesome.
Oh, can you hear me now? Valerie, can you hear me? Valerie, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. This looks super good. This is super clear. This is perfect.
Okay, so can you see the triangle and the pencils?
Yes, everything's on the screen.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and hold on a minute. Let's see. Okay, so are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yep, we're on. It
Okay,
starts. Yep, this is all perfect. It looks gorgeous.
Okay, so is the PowerPoint you're in, is it filling the entire screen?
It is, but then people can adjust to where they can see dual screens, and so like your drawing is part of it, and then there's like the actual like PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so you can see perspective drawing 3-dimensional.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So it's much better than the one on Tuesday.
Yeah, this is, I mean, super clear. It's perfect.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you. I guess we'll get started in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. I'm excited.
Oh, Valerie, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so can you see the background above the pediment at all, or is it just that one window?
I can see about an inch now above the pediment.
Okay, then about an inch around the border of the paper?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good.
It's saying you're unregistered now. Sorry, Jay, I'm sure you can hear my child in the background screaming.
So it looks like there's only about 2 participants, is that right?
My child just decided to have like a quick breakdown right before we started this. So I'm gonna start letting everybody in now though, okay?
Okay, yeah, that's fine, sure.
Right. Hi everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. We're about to get started. Jay's getting situated. We're going to be working in both screens, the shared screen, and then also where he's going to be drawing. So you can feel free to set your screens up to where you can see both or whichever one you prefer. In a little bit, he'll get to talk about what we're going to be doing today. And we're just going to give everyone a few minutes to get in, get settled, and then we'll begin.
Valerie, thanks for allowing me to teach this class. It's been a wonderful opportunity. I guess we'll get started in a few minutes. You're not able to see my face yet because I'm having to share multiple screens. So you really just need to look at the PowerPoint and then the drawing table where my sketches are. So welcome back to class. I think if you remember from class on Tuesday, we just talked about some basic free-handed exercises. Now we're going to be talking about how to properly draw in 3 dimensions. So I think, Val, you might just clue me in to see when everyone attends so I can get started.
Absolutely. We've got 10 participants right now, and we have 35 registered, so we'll just give everybody a few minutes to get in.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys do have your sketchbooks. I'd like for you to draw with me. I'm just going to be doing some basic exercises. I like to have people watch me drawing in first and then do the exercise, but you can work both ways. But this is really to teach you how to properly draw perspectival images. A lot of the images from my PowerPoints go back to Rome and Vicenza. Has anyone actually been to Vicenza and seen some Palladio buildings? Hopefully you have. Well, I guess we'll wait until everyone gets in.
Okay, we just added like another group, Jay, so I think now would be a good time to probably get started.
Okay. All right. Okay, welcome back to class, everyone. I'm Jay Cantrell. I was invited by the wonderful Valerie Wood to start doing these online drawing tutorials. I'm very honored to do this for the Classical Institute. On Tuesday, we talked about just some basic drawing and shading techniques. If you look at my drawing table, I just showed how the students can just quickly draw some shade and shadows to establish three-dimensional layers on this without actually drawing a perspective or an axonometric. So today is going to be talking about perspective drawings. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Okay, hopefully the first slide should be, it's called perspective drawing. It's a three-dimensional drawing type. The ones we did on Tuesday are two-dimensional, really just the elevation studies in the plan, and what's called orthographic projection. But today the first part of the lecture, I'm going to be showing you just some basic history of perspective drawing. Why was this created? How was this even invented? And then we're going to be just doing, you're going to be watching me draw for a little bit. Then you're going to be doing your own exercises in your sketchbook. So really the tools that you'll need for these is your sketchbook. You can use Strathmore paper. I would prefer you using HB or 2B lead. If not, if you're not using pencil, you can use the micron pens, permanent ink pens. I'm actually drawing with the cheapest drawing pen, a Sharpie, just to make sure that the video webcam picks up the details. I would prefer you not to draw with Sharpies. You need to be more professional with some of the markers. Like this is called a micron pen. And then the Statler pens have a much better range of texture between F, HB, and 2B than some of the other products that are out there. And then really the two erasers that you need are really the pink pearl and the gray kneaded eraser. So I guess we'll start talking about perspective. You know, perspective drawing type is really a three-dimensional drawing type created during the Renaissance. If you remember from your history class, art history class from the 1400s, really the famous Filippo Brunelleschi, the one that created and figured out how to actually build the dome of the existing cathedral in Florence that was open for about 50 or 60 years. So he's really the responsible for building the dome and for creating this wonderful drawing type we call perspective drawing. So here's when he was actually constructing the dome in the early 1400s. He was actually able to. He was very observant about his surroundings. He was able to prove that parallel lines in objects or buildings actually converge to one point. He must have been observing this as the old baptistry in Florence in front of the Cathedral of Florence. He was actually able to do a demonstration and prove how parallel lines can converge to one point, which of course gave birth to the language of perspective drawings. We talk about perspectives, really three different types. Simply 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point, which we'll look at in just a minute. It's really important to know your foundations or the history of some of these drawing types. So here's another building that he was just one of the most brilliant Renaissance architects, if there was one. And so this is his Church of Santo Spirito. You can tell that just the language of perspective drawings yields these really dramatic 1 point perspective views. This is down the central nave. But when we talk about perspective, there's a vantage point where all the parallel lines converge to 1 point. This is very revolutionary for art and definitely for architecture. If you looked at images before perspective was created, look at medieval and Gothic renderings or images, the sense of depth is very disturbed because they didn't actually know how to properly proportion things to a vanishing point. This really revolutionized art and architecture during the time. But oh my gosh, look what happened in Pompeii during 79 AD. During the excavation of the 1700s, archaeologists were able to remove some of the volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius that erupted. They were able to remove that and see that the ancient Pompeians already knew how to do 1 point perspectives. You can definitely see, can you guys see the cursor on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you can see that the buildings that are parallel actually go to 1 point, the center of this round temple. It's really amazing to think that, Brunelleschi really didn't invent the drawing type. He recreated it. He wasn't even, this was the 1400s, he wasn't even aware of the Pompeii murals because it had been covered up for years by the volcanic ash. So, of course, he'd already passed on by the 1700s. It's really remarkable to see that when you uncover layers of histories, you see people that have already discovered how to do this. These are some images. I think if you read my profile, these are some perspective drawings I was required to do for the extraordinary Gabriel Prize I did in 2009. I focused on the passages in Paris, these 19th century ironing glass steel corridors, which yields itself a really dramatic perspective drawings. So the images are extremely three-dimensional. If I were to do all these with just the true elevation that's done on the right, then I think it would sacrifice the three-dimensional quality. There's a mixture of sunlight coming in. It's really very inspiring to walk through these. They're actually shopping corridors. But when I was walking through Paris, some of the streets are very dark and claustrophobic. So when I enter these corridors, this is actually Passage Vivian, that the sunlight coming in was really absolutely wonderful and inspiring as an architect or an artist. So these are simply just using the basic elements of perspective, which I'll show you in a minute. And, of course, these are some sketches that I just did loosely before I did the final renderings. This slot in the floor is actually an abstraction of the corridors that cut through the entire urban fabric in Paris. So with just a few little details, you can draw a convincing three-dimensional sketch. This is around the corner from where I studied at the Cité des Arts in Paris. I'm sure you guys have been to Paris before. But there's some really wonderful little tight streets that yield these really wonderful perspective sketches. So when we start the nitty-gritty of drawing perspective drawings, there's really the basic simple type. This is called a one-point perspective. In other words, there's what's called the vanishing point at one point. There's the horizon line. All the parallel elements vanish to that one point to convince that it's a singular plane that is drawn in three dimensions. There's some other complicated ones. The two-point perspective, the things vanish into 2 points, the one on the right, the one on the left. Then when you get some very complex objects, there's multiple vanishing points, which we're not going to focus on in class. But for the most part, we're going to be sketching and studying how to properly draw a one-point perspective drawing. Again, this is a one-point because if I were to draw a floor plan, the plan would be very orthogonal. So in other words, all the parallel lines converge to one point. It's a very sort of dramatic way of drawing a three-dimensional. Look how three-dimensional that's just a singular thin piece of paper. But to show three dimensions, it's just remarkable that somebody had the imagination to figure this out, draw it, and then build these things. Sorry, that's a motorcycle. You didn't hear that, but no. Okay. Let's look at this example. This is the famous Theater of Olympico by Palladio. I'm sure you probably have taken some field trips out there. It's an extraordinary building. It's one of the places in the world where they've literally built a perspective building. If you look at that floor plan, you're probably, if you've never seen this, what on earth are those funky angles? It's bizarre. But of course, what Palladio did was he built some of the streets in Vicenza to make these perspective corridors built during some of the performances. So if you look at the front, there's a large screen wall that disguises the perspective. The seating is, of course, across it, but when you sit, it's a wonderful experience to actually see these. These are some other images that show some of the buildings are actually literally built in perspective. It's just remarkable. I think somebody could conceive this, draw this, and have someone build these things. Now this, if you look at this view, this is a view standing here at the theater looking down the central hallway. So if you actually drew a cross section of that, these would actually taper. It's difficult. It's a very beguiling sort of visual dynamic to see, but it's absolutely extraordinary to actually be in this space and see that something in the world is built literally in a perspective image. Just remarkable. Just by the basic use of some of these early primitive beginnings, the 1 point and then the 2 point perspective. If you guys have ever seen a copy of the Edifices of Rome, Latroui is a wonderful draftsman and engraver, roughly about the same time I think Piranesi was rendering. But if you look at all of his images, his perspectives are just some of the most compelling in the world in terms of drawings. This is a large portico, I think this Palazzo Massimo in Rome, but his perspectives have so much three-dimensional quality in just the images. And what he does, if you've ever seen a copy of some of these books, he kind of exaggerates the scale because the figures are relatively small compared to the proportions. when I was there, a person's roughly up to here. It's interesting that he just kind of made the figure smaller to kind of emphasize the dramatic counterpart in just these images. But these are drawn with a simple technique, what's called a one-point perspective like this. The same drawing type that Brunelleschi created in the Renaissance. Because painting before Brunelleschi's linear invention of perspective were very flat and weren't very three-dimensional. Now this was just kind of like drawing and painting in stereo. This was a remarkable individual that created this drawing type that we still use today. I still teach this in modern architecture in my studios at UTA. Now, these, before we start sketching, these are some images. I'm all over social media. I use Facebook and Instagram. But these are some, if you ever go to this wonderful little pub called the Scarlet Pumpernickel on Main Street, it's across from the old Davis building. There's a little corridor where I built all these perspective, I actually painted all these perspective scenes showing views of old downtown Dallas from the 1920s to the 1940s. So when you walk in here, it's really interesting because the real staircase is on the right through this hallway. Then what I did was, when people get drunk, they try to climb up the stair, they just get drunk and run into the wall. So I have to keep going back and repairing some of the paint. But it's a really sort of visibly beguiling perspective scene to actually walk through. It's a very small little court. If you have an opportunity, it's a really wonderful, kind of exciting space to walk through. So I like to just do sketches of perspective and actually apply them into my professional work as well. So if you look at the street just looks like it hangs off the wall like that. So of course, this is all just done in one plane, but with perspective, you can, trick people's eyes and imagination to think that things are larger and much deeper than they actually are. So this is a window that's actually just painted on a plate. It just looks like it's projecting out from the wall, but of course, it's simply just the tricks of light and shade, loosely based on what we talked about on Tuesday. These are some very powerful, these are, of course, drawings that Frank Lloyd Wright did for his office. I know these are mostly classical architects, but the reason I show this is because for students, it's really easy to draw and understand just his architecture because he's pretty much building perspectives in person. I mean, I might be a little bit wrong about that, but the nature of his architecture just lends for students to understand how to properly draw a one-point perspective. The same thing with his interior, the same thing with its exterior. But look how powerful just that one-point perspective image is. Now, if we're going to start doing some just beginning studies, if you're just to attempt to draw these as a beginner, it'll be very difficult. There's a lot of complex curves. The diagonals are off the orthogonal. So we're just going to be doing some very orthogonal things at the beginning. Now, do you guys have any questions about the PowerPoint lecture so far? I'm sure you've probably seen these before. Any questions or comments? Can you imagine drawing a perspective of that? A lot of multiple vanishing points, but San Francisco yields these really exciting three-dimensional images. Okay, hopefully you can see, I'm going to change the perspective and you can see my drawing table. Can you see the drawing table with the arch?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think I showed these before, how you can just convincingly show some shades and shadows on the facade. Okay, so let's just enter sketchbooks. Why don't we watch me draw for a minute? I'm just going to simply draw a perspective quarter. You can draw with me, but I'm just going to quickly show you how you can actually show a certain amount of depth before having known all the sort of dynamics and nomenclature, how to draw a perspective. But there's what's called a horizon line. And can you guys see the line on here?
Yes, and it's not blurry today.
Oh, great, thank God. Okay, so the horizon line is really your eye level because perspectives actually project yourself into the paper. So when eye level is roughly about 5 or 5.5 feet, I would establish a vanishing point first. Then let's say I would just want to draw a perspective hallway. I just would start with a box like that. I would take the vanishing point, sketch back to the points. draw that. Let's put some limits on how far the perspective, the corridor actually goes back in the paper. Then in your sketchbook, I would just go back in and darken in just the boundary like this. I hate to draw the Sharpie markers, but they're clear and dark for, you know, educational purposes. So let's just go back and draw a window on the left side. So let's just say the window's here. You know, if this is roughly about 5.5 feet, then this cord is probably 10 or 11 feet tall. So if you look at photographs in perspective, you can tell roughly how tall some of these spaces or these structures are. So if I were to go back and draw a window, I would project back to the vanishing point here. Then I would just go back and quickly draw an opening. Then I would draw the wall thickness like that. I would just go back and shade in the negative space. The same thing, you can do the skyline on the ceiling. You can project back to the vanishing point like that. So then let's try to draw some trees that go back into the perspective corridor. Let's draw some topiary. I would just, you know, by that it's called foreshortening, where things that get closer to the vanishing point get smaller and smaller and smaller. Here's some of the trunks. The same thing on the right. Then I would just draw some tiling patterns in the floor. In other words, the tiling pattern will get closer and closer as it approaches the vanishing point because we're doing foreshortening. So eventually this thing will just gradually get closer and closer and closer. You know, then you can possibly go back in and shade in the sky around this. So there you've just quickly drawn a small corridor in perspective like that. But look how three-dimensional this is versus just showing an elevation that just has just the frame on it. You know, that's very three-dimensional. Let's look at something else. So if I were to draw, let's take that simple corridor I just drew and let's draw an arched barrel vault. So with some of the techniques we learned about on Tuesday to draw a curve, I'm just used to drawing freehanded curves. I've been doing this for many years. So what I would do is establish the center of the midpoint. And with a piece of paper or scale, I would just draw this dimension and plot the points. Like this, and go back and just connect the dots like that. So in order to draw a perspective corridor of the vault, I would just establish the horizon line. Let's move, instead of the vanishing point at the center, let's move the vanishing point over. So it's a little more interesting. So then I would just go back in and project what's called the spring line back to the vanishing point. Let's just arbitrarily choose. So what you're doing is you're making the opening smaller by virtue of the foreshortening. Then I would just go back and do the same thing you did here for step 1 for the curve. Then for step 2, I just draw another center line and just measure and carefully draw the barrel vault that's in the corridor. And then you can start showing shading to establish the one side is probably in shadow like that. Just a few simple tricks. Again, I kind of have to assume that you guys have really never drawn perspective before. If this is boring, then we'll get onto something a little more sophisticated next week. But this is just a very quick study that you can do to actually just try to draw a perspective vault in this sort of drawing technique. Of course, if you're not comfortable sketching with freehand, then you can use your triangle and your circle template. So pretty much to draw in a one-point perspective, the curves are exactly the same. They're not distorted. If I were to draw a 2-point perspective, then it would be done something more like this, where it's a little bit more complicated to draw like that. Okay. Okay, so what I like to, these are just some very beginning basic exercises. what I was going to show you is if in your sketchbook, I would just start drawing what's called, let's just try to draw the cube in perspective. So here's the square. You know, maybe the cube is 3 feet tall. The horizon line is here. Let's just make up where the vanishing point occurs. So then I would just project all the corners back to the vanishing point. Then I would just kind of from observation, just draw the cube in perspective. So there you did a perspective drawing in just a few minutes. So you can do the perspective vault, you can do the cube. So let's kind of expand the cube and do something a little bit more exciting. I would just project up and just simply draw some horizontal planes, regularly spaced. Then if I were to draw the planes in perspective, I would simply just the same technique. I would just constantly go back in and draw these back in perspective, each one of these. Then for clarification purposes, I would just go back in and draw the planes in perspective like that. You know, then to clarify these, you can maybe put some shading underneath the planes just to make them float off the sheet like that. But I mean, look how powerful just that 1-point perspective is. Those planes coming toward you. You can be a little bit more adventurous and maybe draw some planes that are up here in the foreground. All you have to do is just project back to the vanishing point and then just, you know, just make up where the blocks end. If I were to draw a 1 at the bottom of this one, I would go back in and just kind of outline. Let me know if I'm going too fast. So look how 3-dimensional, it's just a singular sheet of paper. You can draw 3 dimensions on that singular plane. And what a little genius that Brunelleschi figured out how to properly draw these things like that. Okay, so have I lost everyone on this, or is that just kind of?
No, it's good.
Okay, good. Let's do something a little bit more intriguing. What I was saying is really the nomenclature or the proper ordering of the perspective nature is that there's really 3 things. The horizon line is everything in a perspective. Horizon line. And then of course, the same thing is, it's really the eye level, this is the same thing. For some reason, I just easier to draw fat people than I can draw thinner models. The eye level, then, you know, if you were to draw a perspective in plan, if this were the plan of a space like this, there's something called the cone of vision. I'm sure you've seen it. It depends on where you're standing in the space for an object. If the object is here, then the cone of vision is really close to the space. The same thing. The station points.
Can you pull the paper down a little bit, Jay?
Yes, like this.
Perfect.
Can you see the station point?
Yep.
Okay. The station point is really where you're standing in front of an object. Here's the elevation or the cross section. Then here's the plan. So let's take a look at, if you're like, let's move the person closer to the object. Let's see what happens. You know, the elements in this are very somewhat, well, I'm sorry, I didn't draw that correctly, but it depends on, the elements are going to be very distorted the closer you stand and look at things. It's always better to sort of pull back. So that way there's a little more atmosphere between the person standing and then the object itself. I'm not really sure I kind of explained that clearly, but so when you start doing more sophisticated perspective, you're going to need to know the station point and, of course, the cone of vision. In your sketches, let's just try to quickly draw a staircase. So I'll just draw an elevation. The nice thing about one-point perspective is that you can just simply work from, I can just draw the stairs. Can you guys see the whole sheet on this?
Yep.
Let's just draw a staircase like this. You know, here's what's called the stringer, the diagonal plane underneath the treads and risers. So how about I draw the stair in perspective? These are probably 6 inches, 1, 2, probably this roughly is about 5 feet tall. So at your eye level, the vanishing, let's just make up a vanishing point like this one is here. And I would just lightly draw back each one of these corners back to the vanishing point. The same thing with the corner like that. Then I would just go back and draw the depth of the steps that go back into the foreshortening field. So pretty much what you're doing is you're just taking this plane in the front and the vantage point is making the stair smaller in perspective like that. So we can make the stair a little bit more gray. We can do a curve. You can draw some structural voussoirs, like we're drawing a bridge in Venice. Here's the radius. Then let's draw a doorway at the top of the stairs. Let's just say that door is roughly this tall. Then this, I would just project back to the vanishing point. Like that, draw the thickness of the doorway. Then you can go back and sketch just a kind of a pediment here at the top. So look how simple that is just to draw 3 dimensions, which is some very basic subjects. Have I lost anybody? Okay, so on the screen, you can see there's, I know if you guys don't like Frank Lloyd Wright's work, that's fine, but it's really easy to teach people how to draw perspectives, just the language of the orthogonal planes on this one. You guys can see the perspective image we have on the screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how would I start drawing that? So if you talk about the horizon on the eye level, where is the eye level in this image? Would anyone like to point that out? Let me see if I can actually draw that. Oh. Can you guys see the blue line?
Yes.
Okay, so look at that. Your eye level is right underneath the coping of that. So the first mark I would put on the sheet is I would just draw that line. The horizon line goes first, then figure out where the vanishing point is. So in the photograph, you can just draw some lines that converge. I'm not good at drawing in PowerPoint. Just figure out where the lines can, oh, sorry. So pretty much roughly at that pier. So if you look at my sketchbook, here's the horizon line. Then here's the point. Then I would just draw some, if this is the bottom of the coping, then I would just draw some diagonals like that from the vanishing point. then I would just start drawing the coping like that. You know, then the nice thing about Wright is using these true Roman horizontal, not the tacky bricks that people use in North Dallas, but you can see the bricks are these very early classical Roman proportions, which is very conducive for his, you know, horizontality in his work. Then I would just go back and draw some guidelines like this to draw the bricks. I'll draw that. Then the same technique that we do with the stairs, you can start drawing. Can everybody see the sketch?
Yes.
Here's one tread, another one. Here's another tread. Like that. Then pretty much all the bricks, since they're parallel in an elevation, they will all go back to the vanishing points. So let's go ahead and draw that pier at the center. And also that eve is just right there at the front. So at the vanishing point, so in other words, I would draw that roof plane coming towards me like that. Then there's another pier that's here. I would draw the top of that back to the vanishing point. You can see the corner of that. So then the corner of the larger pier aligns with the coping there. Then I would draw the top of the coping like that. Then if you want to draw this back in perspective, just continue the perspective lines like that. So then I would just go back and clarify where some of the windows are. And when doing shading, I like to maintain a consistent grain. So here's the large window so that all these things die into. Okay, then of course, the other window details at the top. Then, you know, where the eave kind of overhangs things, I would draw that back in perspective. You know, this is a very complex subject to draw, but just with some simple techniques, you can draw this thing. And look how powerful that staircase just comes right in your face, right? Then I just would finish the sketch by drawing the other masonry elements here like that. And I just lightly go back and shade in the bricks. Then, of course, the coping projects out pretty far, so there is a large shadow from the projected coping. So look how three-dimensional just that image is. Then I would go back and put shading to show that the windows are all in shade like that. Hopefully you guys are actually attempting to draw these, but it really just starts with establishing the horizon line and the vanishing point. So in your sketch, I would encourage, like, let's try to draw the cube one more time. You know, I just would start with a square. Draw the horizon line. Just make up a vanishing point. And that's really all that it is. If you want to make let's just kind of draw a tiling pattern on the floor. So if I wanted to draw a square grid, I would probably just measure the points on the horizon line, equally spaced. And then I just would go back in and try to draw. Hold on, I made a terrible mistake. Let's just draw the grid, the tiling pattern here. Then to draw the grid in perspective, I would just go back in and connect everything back to the vanishing point. Like that. Then I just would draw the grid gradually getting smaller and smaller as it gets to the vanishing point. Yeah, so look how much depth just these few lines convey. Then if I want to draw a doorway or a frame, I just would draw the thickness of the wall that goes back to the vanishing point. The same thing here. Same thing like that. Okay, is everyone clear on that so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's just go back over we'll take a break in about 15 minutes. What I mean, there's some terminology that I think you might have been a little bit confused on, which is fine. But parallel lines converge to one point. If I were to draw a facade, let's just take for an image from De Chirico's paintings. If you've seen his really enigmatic paintings with perspective cores and shadows, those are very compelling about the language of perspective. So in elevation, and also to draw a row of arches, I like to establish a continual line. So that way the arches all die up to the top like that. So if, like, say if there's a wainscot or a pedestal base. In other words, if I were to draw this in perspective, all these lines will converge to one point. So what would a perspective of this one look like? So can you guys see the elevation and the new sheet underneath? Can you guys see both of these?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, so in other words, a perspective would look like can you guys still see this?
We can see we can't see the arches.
Now remember this image because I'm going to move the sketchbook up.
Okay,
So then you can see that, right?
yes.
Okay, so I would just take these points, the top, the spring line, the coping, and just register them on this vertical plane. The top, the spring line, the coping. Then I would just simply, the first thing I would do is just project these back to the vanishing point. And then just simply draw the piers gradually diminishing in scale off into the distance. I just lost that sheet. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bays. 3, 4, 5, and then I just would go back in and just kind of freehand the curves like that. So then to actually draw the top of this edge, you would simply project that back to the vanishing point. It's much easier if you use a straight edge to do that. So that's what I talked about. Parallel lines converge to one point in space. So let's add some thickness and dimension to the columns. So this is going to be exactly parallel to the horizon because it's a one point. Then I just would go back in and freehand the top of that, then just freehand the curves. Then let's go back in and maybe darken in where the sky is with just some simple shading techniques. Look how three-dimensional just a few lines can convey is such a certain amount of depth in that one sheet. Then it gets a little more difficult if you're drawing a complete, an entire colonnade. So in other words, if this were the edge of the facades are across from that, then the left side would be much, much more distorted. In other words, the arches would be very difficult to perceive in the drawing because the left side is so foreshortened. It'd be really hard to draw those curves like that. And I just would make up a tiling pattern that aligns with the columns, divide this into thirds, and you have a perspective quarter with arches. Now, if you're drawing arches in perspective, that's kind of a totally different animal. We'll get to that in a little bit later, but again, in perspective, in elevation, you're drawing true circles, the half round. This is A, this is A, this is A. But in perspective, you're drawing a very distorted curve like this, which means you have to just kind of carefully draw. What I would do is practice. Just take this, which is 2 squares. Then I just would try to draw a foreshortened 2 square relationship like this. And then I just would carefully go back in and try to draw the curves like that. It's just a certain amount of practicing the foreshortened curves. I know these are very difficult to do for people that haven't done a lot of free-handed exercises. Okay, so I think when you get some guidebooks on properly how to draw perspectives, the first example they show is the railroad tracks. I'm sure you've seen these. Hold on, there's a fire truck. Hopefully my building isn't burning. This is the most basic way to draw perspective. You show the rail ties here, I'm sorry, the rails. And then you'll show the ties being quickly foreshortened in the background. Then, I think the other classical cliche is to show, well, I mean, the basic is to show the telephone lines that come back in perspective like that. Hold on, just sorry about that. I think I mentioned I live in the old Kirby building on Main Street. It's never boring. There's always noise and people and okay, so any questions about the exercises so far? I kind of have to imagine that you've never really drawn perspectives before. So these are some very beginning exercises.
Good.
Okay, so is anyone lost? It's fine if you are. So have you guys been able to draw some of these in your sketchbook?
Trying, but you're way too fast.
Am I going too fast? Just tell me to slow down, yeah.
If I can't get everything, I take a screenshot.
Okay. Oh, which exercise should I slow? We have about 10 minutes until our break. Which exercise should I slow down to where you can actually draw while I'm actually drawing? Which one?
Maybe do the arches in perspective again.
The colonnade?
Yes, but the way you showed the one-dimensional arch
Okay, yeah, let me,
and then transferred it down.
okay, hold on. Let me get the sketch just a minute. You're talking about this one?
No, the one where you had the one-dimensional arches and then you cast down the lines to show it in perspective.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking about the one that looks like this, like that. I think I know what you're talking about. Okay, let's start with just draw what I would draw the horizon line. Let's say the barrel vault is 10 feet tall. So your eye level is roughly 5 or 5.5 feet. So then I would draw just a rectangle like that. You're talking about the one that has the 1 point, right? That's like that.
Yes, and then you cast down from that drawing to do a perspective.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so everyone can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's, the first thing to do is just draw, you could draw this many different ways. You could draw the horizon. You could, like, if this is 10 feet, again, roughly an eye level is 5.5 feet. So then, I would just carefully construct the radius at the top. So let's just make up, where does the vanishing point, if the vanishing point lies on the right, because if you draw architecture with the vanishing point at the center, things are very boring. Let's kind of shift that over to the right. So let's take what's called the spring line. And so to project the curve back into perspective, I would just draw this corner to the vanishing point like that. Like that. And I'm just going to simply make up a depth, like roughly here. I'll just kind of connect the dots. So the spring line that is here, it's transferred in foreshortening back to here. Okay, are you guys with me?
Yes.
Hold on just a moment. Let me get. Okay, so I'm just going to do, this is not really for your sketch, but let's kind of watch what happens, how that actually works. So here's the actual arch. So what happens is to transfer that down, it's the same, what I would do, the same technique where you take the midpoint, project the midpoint back down. So that way this part is actually at the center. Then what I would do is just freehand the curve that goes back like that.
Got it.
So really all you have to do is just exactly, in other words, it's the same curve, just displaced much further down. So it's now, like if this, let's say this is dimension A. Dimension A will be marked at the center of this edge. Then you just draw that down like that. So then to make the drawing read better, I just would lightly put some shading in. And gradually fade out to the right, because if the light is coming from here, then eventually the light will just blend into the part that is facing the sunlight. And I'm just using the side of my, H pencil to draw this way. Okay, so in a few minutes, I'm just going to add some details to that should be relatively easy for you to draw. Okay, let's draw that one more time. Let me redraw that. That was a terrible sketch to do on sketch paper. Okay, so we have, the barrel vault drawn in perspective. So let's add a window on the left side. How would we do that? So this is roughly 5 feet. So let's draw a window. I would mark the position on what's called this vertical measuring plane line. So let's project these back to the vanishing point lightly. Then just imagine a window that's cut open like that. So then the edge of the thick wall will just be exactly parallel to the picture plane or the horizon line. Then I just would go back and draw some darkness in for the sky. So can you guys do that?
Yes.
Okay. And actually, I would like to see, people's sketches. If you're gonna, Valerie, are we able to upload these on Zoom?
So we can screen share, and just if anybody has it to where they can show their video, they can then just talk and they will be the forefront of the screen. So anybody can just hold up their drawings.
Okay. Okay, let's try to go back and add the window, and then after our break at 1:15, I'd at least like to see some of your sketches. But we're going to be doing some other exercises, so. Then what I like to do is just kind of extend the floor out. And let's try to draw a stair coming towards the front, the picture plane. Am I going too fast?
No, this is good.
Okay, so let's draw a tiling pattern in just this platform that's here in the front. Okay, so let's just draw. What I would do is measure equally 3 bays, A. Then to project the tiling pattern forward, you always go back to your vanishing point like that, like this. Then I just would kind of quickly, if you want to draw a diagonal, to divide the foreshortened side into 3, you would just mark these where the intersection goes. Okay, did you guys see that?
Can you do that again?
Sure. Okay, so let's take okay, so let's take the floor that extends out. So to properly show a grid on the floor that's divided into 3, divide the measuring line, the horizontal that's parallel to the eye level, into 3.
Got it.
Okay. So then we don't need to even we can't measure on the foreshortened side because it's not to a particular scale. So then let's go back to the vanishing point as always, like that. So how would we get 3 equal spaces properly foreshortened on the side here? Let's draw a diagonal from this corner to this corner. And then where these intersect, then you're going to show, wow, look how simple that is, right? That's easy, you can do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's remarkable that somebody actually, had the foresight to properly create this drawing. It's just, And what I like to do is go back and draw, a triumphal arch. I draw the keystone. If I want to draw the voussoirs, go back to the center point and draw that. Then I could just draw an entablature. I mean, I could spend all day just drawing this beautiful, portal like that. So then let's just, I mean, I have so much fun drawing. I just want to show you that we can draw a pedestal with a large planter like this, and you have your topiary tree, bing, bang, boom, like that. So. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Let's take a 15-minute break. What I'd like you to do is the next 15 minutes, just practice drawing just some basic elements. You can try to draw the square, the cube in perspective. You can try to draw the doorway. Let's not draw arches just yet. So let's take a 2-minute break. I'll come back at 1:15 and then I'll show you some other images. So does that kind of help you how to actually construct a perspective drawing?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a minor miracle to get a 3D because perspectives are very intimidating for beginners. But it's just with a few strokes you have a 3-dimensional image. Then it just goes back to putting shading on this. Like I could probably just continue this corridor out into the garden, and then I could go back and show the sky. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rushing through this because we're supposed to be on our break. Then you can put some shading on the left side to make it look even more 3-dimensional. Like that. Okay, I'll see you guys in 10 or 15 minutes. Does that work?
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, does somebody else have a question? Okay, so in 15 minutes, I'm going to show you some quick 2 points. These are very dramatic. I just like 1-point perspectives, but we'll come back at 1:15. Okay, see you in a few minutes. Valerie, are you still there?
Yes. How can I help? Jay, can you hear me? Hello? Hey, Jay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I got it. I was accidentally muted. I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
Okay, good.
How can I help?
No, can you see the new PowerPoint I've uploaded?
I can, it's gorgeous.
Okay, great. I guess we'll get started in about 3 more minutes. It's 1:12.
And we have a couple questions in the chat if,
I'm not sure how to even open this.
so I can read them to you and I can respond.
Okay.
The first one was back kind of when we started. They wanted to know which Frank Lloyd Wright house that was.
Oh, okay, good. We'll look at that. It's the Martin House from 1904.
And then the next one was, they would like to touch on the colonnade perspective again, but we can go back to that.
Okay.
And then if we could get some pictures kind of shared into the chat as well, if you guys are open to doing that instead of sharing the screens.
Okay. I guess I'll let you. I'm not sure how to do that on my end. You mean in Zoom? Have the participant?
Yeah, they can upload files and then we can show them off. And then one person wants to know who drew the detailed 1-point perspective with the subjects reduced in scale, which you showed at the beginning.
Who drew the? Oh, you mean the engravings? Hold on. Let me. I think I know what you're asking. Let me get back to a different.
And then someone wants to know where you got the miniature Corinthian column.
Oh, there's a story on that. Yeah, that's great. I didn't make it. Now, actually, you're talking about this one. Can you see my drawing table?
Yeah.
Look how exquisite. This is a tiny little piece. It's actually part of a larger model. It's from, I think it's called Decorator Supply Company in Chicago. That make all these wonderful little fragments and pieces. I think they're still in business. When I worked for Ralph Dusing, a lot of his trim and details came from that company. I think it is called Decorator Supply Company from Chicago. I think that this is.
It is. It's Decorator Supply, and they are still in business for sure.
Okay, yeah, if you look at the back of this, you can. Well, this used to be glued onto a model, but you can see actually the pieces. They have to hand make these because these are flexible when they come out of the mold. Then they go and bend them and fold the canthus around. These are very tedious to do. I mean, I tried to carve some of these, but I just lost my patience with it. It's exquisite little piece of craftsmanship, is it not? Excuse me. Let me see. Let me turn my. Hold on, my camera around just a moment. Can you guys see the model? Valerie, can you see that?
Yes.
This is a large model I built of Palladio's Villa Valmarana, but it has tons of little pieces. I bought some of the pieces from a dollhouse shop in North Dallas, which I'm embarrassed to admit, but they had just incredible pieces of detail. I mean, I actually built. This is exactly the model that was featured in one of the Palladio's books of architecture. I can email you guys some images if you want to see that. the ballast art has some missing teeth. I didn't really have time to finish it, but. And the scale of this thing is huge. I think it's like probably 4 feet tall. Can you see the triangle with this one? I'll try to get some better photographs, but yeah, this is actually my facade, my interior facade of my studio there, but it's really a magnificent building. Well, let me show you this. This is, you know, I tried to get, because really the corner of this Palladio, hold on a minute, sorry. You know, Palladio ended the building with these sculptures like that, but I couldn't figure out a proper scale. So this is just an example, but I wasn't able to finish it because the sculptures really didn't fit on the model. But
How long did it take you to build that model?
oh, it took me probably about a year. I just worked on it for a few hours a day. It's actually just half of it. What I was gonna do is build the other half, but I just completely lost steam and went back to graduate school. I was gonna build a mirror and photograph it with a reflection of the other part of the facade, but I never really got a chance to do that. But
Wow.
yeah, it's plotted. Yeah, it's a pretty extraordinary facade,
Agree.
but it was definitely fun to work on. Okay, so Valerie, what were some of the other questions? It was the Martin House by 1904, and let me see. I think you're talking about. Can you see the PDF, the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, you're talking about these engravings. Somebody had a question, Valerie, about these. Were you talking about these? He was asking about these.
Sorry, I'm trying to scroll back through the chat.
Well, it's these.
Yeah, who drew the detailed 1-point perspectives?
Okay.
With the subjects reduced in scale.
This one right here, right?
This is from Glenn.
Okay, Glenn, is this the right image you're looking at? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Glenn said no.
Okay, now these are from
One of the theater from Olympico.
oh. What you mean, these images?
Glenn said no to that too.
Okay, so
Right after those images.
this one. You're talking about this one?
Yes. Who drew this?
This incredible book. It's the author's name is Letroui, Edifices of Rome. He pretty much has drawn, these are actually engravings that he and his apprentices did for pretty much all the palazzos in Rome. There's several books. It's called, he did the entire Vatican, then he did Edifices of Rome, Letroui. That's how you probably spell that. You know, this is drawn in a time where people didn't have cell phones or Instagram. They focused on their work and could do complete incredible images like that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Sorry about that, Glenn. Glad we figured it out.
Okay. Then I think I can go back and answer some questions after the seminar. If you look at my drawing table, there's a wonderful book. It's called The Science of Art. And there's really not one great manual on how to actually properly draw perspective. There's hundreds, if not thousands of books. Francis Ching, it's called Architectural Graphics. He shows some glimpses of how to properly just construct freehand perspectives. But I would definitely get this book. It's not a pretty coffee table book at all. It does have some science and technology of how to properly draw things in perspective. And there's a lot of information to read and decipher, but it's very insightful. Then the other book is Carl Christian Heuser. It's called Freehand Drawing and Sketching. He quickly shows you how to do some perspectives. So they're really these two books. For beginners, I would definitely actually get this one. It's Martin Kemp. Can you see the entire book facade on the table?
Yes.
Okay, so we're back from a commercial break. I'm just gonna do some quick 1 points again, and then we'll talk about doing 2 points. Hopefully I haven't really discouraged anyone from drawing. You know, you're beginners, I'm assuming, so it just takes practice. Let's just kind of take, for example, let's just kind of draw an interior of a room. How many interior designers do we have in the house this evening? Just several. Okay, now if you look at my perspective drawings I showed you on Tuesday, I can show those in a minute. But pretty much what I like to do is I always work to draw perspective, I always work from an elevation. In other words, I first hard line the elevation. Say if this is a living room, what I do is I just measure the length and of course the height. Let's say this ceiling is 9 feet tall. Again, I was going to say, I'd rather be drawing classical architecture with arches and Latrobe and Renaissance, but those are so difficult for beginners to draw. We're just going to draw some basic squares and rectangles. So 9 by, I don't know, 20 feet. Let's say that's 20 feet. So your eye level is roughly going to be 5.5 feet, which means that your eye is closer to the ceiling than it is to the floor. Let's just kind of just imagine a living room. So let's, the worst thing to do is put your vanishing point where your eye level is at the center, because all the lines are exactly the same on both sides. I like to just kind of move things around. Let's shift the vanishing point to the right. So to draw the perspective box, I would connect this corner. And you can use your straight edge like that. Now let's just imagine the depth of this box. So in other words, the vanishing point transfers the rectangular box at a smaller scale inside the room itself. Okay, so I'm just going to draw some windows on the left and the right side. I could draw a door. Let's try to draw a door. I would just imagine. How would I draw the top of the door in perspective? Every corner always goes back to the vanishing point. Let's draw a thick wall. Like that. Then go back and shade it in. Then on the right side, we can draw a window. It's probably right there. So pretty much all the parallel lines go back to the vanishing point. Okay, so let's just draw a coffee. Oh, sorry about that. A coffee table in the room. How would I do that? How on earth would I draw a coffee table? Let's just start with one line. Let's draw this one. Okay, let's just, for the other corners, let's just project back to the vanishing point. Like that. Then let's draw the thickness of the table. Then we can draw the base. Then the corner will go back to the vanishing point like that. Okay, let's just draw a small couch. Sorry about that. We have to suffer through the rap music. That's okay. So is everyone on this page so far?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just draw just a simple couch. I'm going to draw the facade, the short end of the couch in the perspective. I'm just going to draw this. I'm just going to draw the sloped back like that. Nothing fancy, just that little rectangular image like that. Just for clarity purposes, let's go back and highlight the profile that counts. You know, how on earth would I draw this in perspective? Of course, obviously, I would go back. Every corner goes back to the vanishing point. This, like that. Then I just would imagine the depth of the sofa. Then let's just draw some pillows. Bing, bang, boom, like that. Okay, so let's draw an arched opening at the very back plane of this. Okay, so say it's centered on the wall. Here's the center of the wall here. Then the arch could spring from the eye level. Let's draw the thick wall. Let's draw a window on the left side. Then one on the right. Then let's draw the same thickness here. On the arch that you did on two of the windows. So how would we do that? Here's the vanishing point. So you're not going to see the left side of the window, you're going to see the right only. Project always back to the vanishing point. Do that. The same thing on the left side. I would go back and maybe shade these in. Okay, so there, we just did a simple, basic perspective of a room. Then let's kind of add some Palladianism. Let's draw a Diocletian window, which I love. The three base here, then the doors here. That. Then the hardware. Okay, so pretty nice, right? Am I going too fast?
Give us a couple minutes to do this.
Okay, I'm sorry. I never know how fast I'm going. Okay, you guys might want to clue me into when I can start.
I'm good now.
Okay. Well, again, and Valerie, this is recorded, right?
Yes, it's recorded, and once we do the final edits, we will upload kind of both of them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to make a long story short, I wasn't expecting you guys to just draw an image while I'm sitting here drawing, but it's just, I just wanted to see how, I work.
relieved because I'm way behind.
Oh, but that's right. Well, there's no hurry. There's no grade. It's good to watch the teacher draw something, how to manually do these.
I agree.
Okay, it's 1:30. Why don't we regroup in about 5 minutes? I'm going to show you some 2-point perspectives. Okay, why don't we just kind of regroup in about 1 or 2 more minutes? And then Valerie, somebody had a question. I want to go back to the arch colonnade in perspective. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, let me get that sketch off for just a moment. Okay, I think we're at a stopping point. We need to kind of move on. So somebody was asking me about how to draw the colonnade.
Yeah, yes, this is great.
Okay, so let's not worry about the arches first. Let's just get the spacing. Can you see the small sketch I did of the elevation?
Perfectly.
Good. Okay, so just we talked about on Tuesday just basic shade and shadow. What I would do is just go back in and shade in the spaces in between that just to make this elevation read much stronger like that. Really, if you're drawing shades and shadows, then I would be doing this. And then, of course, you draw the shadows much darker. Okay, so to draw this in perspective, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So I just quickly just kind of drew a perspective view like this. Let's get this into 5 bays. I just arbitrarily spaced 1, 2, 3, 4. So that way, in plan, they're gradually getting closer and smaller towards the vanishing point. Does that kind of make sense? So in other words, each one of these bays is going to get smaller. The width will get smaller. So then I like to just mark that on the ground plane. Then I just would draw some verticals, project it up. And then if you know the measurements, then the spring line is roughly here. Let's just put, you can just sort of mark, if the eye level is here, then the spring line is roughly above that. So the eye level is here, then the spring line is probably right there. Then the pedestal will be somewhere down there. So I would just march these 5 divisions here, and then the 2 elements, the spring line and then the pedestal. Okay, so let's take a look. So this line here is here. Forget about that one. Forget that edge up there. So then to draw the rows of colonies, I would just project back to the vanishing point like this, like that. Okay, if you go back to your elevation, you can see that there's pretty much a substantial thickness between the arches. I would just draw some little tick marks like this. Then let's draw. Am I going too fast?
No, this is great.
Then let's just establish the apex of the arch here. So that's roughly there. Then, with a different color pencil, you can draw that spring line back to the vanishing point like this. So then, to draw the arches, I just kind of by observation just draw the little midpoints, and then just carefully draw the curves. from point A to point B, point A to point B, point A to point B, point A to point B. They're not perfect because they're free-handed, but
That's what I needed, that midpoint. That's great.
okay, good. So if you actually drew a larger elevation of just the curve itself, we have the radius. You know, you can see that the curve, the semicurve actually occupies 2 squares. So you can just visibly, to get this drawn correctly, you can imagine the 2 squares drawn in perspective like that.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay. Okay, so now let's continue and draw the rest of the column. All you do is just free hands all the way down like that. Without even doing any more drawings, or look how three-dimensional just that perspective vault goes into the distance. Okay, so before we draw the pedestal base, let's draw the thickness of the walls, the arches that come in. So in other words, this will be drawn exactly parallel to the horizon because it's a 1 point. So I just would draw some horizontals from the corners. The spring line, the same condition. Then you just go back and draw the remaining of the curve inside that. Then after that's finished, let's make it look a little bit more, have some more depth. I would just go back and then shade in the part above the horizon line and then the arches like that. Okay, so then to continue and finish the rest of the pedestal base, then they're all going to march along each column. And my sketch is getting a little bit fussy. It's kind of probably hard to read, but let's just draw a few of these. So pretty much all the lines will still converge to the vanishing point. You do the same detail with each one of these. Okay, how are you doing with that?
Great.
So let's just quickly draw a cornice. You know, just quickly sketch. We don't have to know the proper rules, or I just draw this. Then you just connect back to the vanishing point. Then the cornice will gradually get larger and larger and larger, like that. If I wanted to draw a dental mold, I just would quickly sketch some vertical lines. Nothing crazy. that. So let's do some plating. Is what I would like to do is just draw some circles in between each one of these bays like that. Circles are hard to draw in perspective. In true elevation, circles like here, but in perspective, they're ellipses like that. Like that. And then after you do that, you can go back and just draw a large field for the grid, just to give the drawing some more spatial qualities. That. You know, to me, it's just extraordinary. You can take a blank piece of paper and make, because I just want to jump right into that piece of paper and walk in there. You know, it's just extraordinary. You can actually create a three-dimensional surface on just this one plane. You know, thanks to Brunelleschi for the most part. Okay, it's 150. I was going to show some other extras. I was going to show you a 2-point, but then do you want to upload your sketches that you've done so we can see it as a class, or Valerie, any suggestions?
I'm sorry, I had a very loud child screaming in my ear just then. What was the question?
No, you're fine. I just was going to ask the participants, do you want to share your screen to show your sketches, or do you want me to do? I was going to show a quick 2-point perspective if they want to see that. It's up to them.
There are some examples uploaded in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can access those. Hold on. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm not seeing those. Any suggestions on how to do this? Oh, hi, Barry. Do you remember me? Okay, how would I just see the other students' work? I can't see other people's work. Okay, well, we have about 10 or 15 more minutes. I'm just going to quickly show you a 2-point perspective, and then I'd be happy to look at some of your other work a little bit later after the class.
Jay, I think the only way for you to do it would be to go to the chat.
Okay, let me see. Oh,
It's the middle button at the bottom of the screen.
okay. Yeah, you just make it sound so easy. The middle button at the bottom of the screen. Okay.
And then a little white box will pop up.
Chat. I have the white box. Okay. Oh, all right. Okay, Austin Wilson, you have the sketch uploaded. I'm trying to upload that. Okay. Unfortunately, I have to actually download this. Do you have to do that on your end, Valerie?
Yes, so if you download it, then where your PowerPoint currently is on that screen, you could show it there. So we can see you downloading it, and then you can show it and talk about it on your screen.
Okay, I'm getting these awful security breach messages downloading it. Let me see.
I promise it's not a virus.
Okay, is this Austin?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let me, I'm trying to do, let me see. All right, hold on just a moment. Now, Valerie, is this just going to cut out at 2 o'clock, or do we have some more time?
No, we've got more time.
Okay, because I would hate to end the meeting in the next 10 minutes when people are showing me their work.
The other option is if you want me to, I can just share my screen.
Yeah, well, let's do that because I'm not. I should have. Where's my assistant? I mean, I can't really see that. If you mind sharing your screen, it would be better. Okay, you want to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, unfortunately, you'll have to stop sharing your screen first.
Oh, I see. Okay. Like this.
It still shows me that you're sharing here. I can. It's not. It's not letting me the other way.
I can see your sketches. Maybe he could just talk about, if he can see it, he can just talk about it and we can all download it and see it.
Yeah, this is supposed to be easy to do. So I really can't see anyone's sketches. I'm sorry. There's something I'm doing wrong.
Hey guys, I was just able to download it, so I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie.
No problem. Sorry, I was just in the process of doing that. So can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep.
Jay, you included?
I see the sculpture for the ICAA. I don't see any drawings though.
Are you guys seeing the perspective?
No, I can't.
I see it.
I can see it.
Actually, Valerie, can you text it to me real quick, or does that work? I just want to see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm seeing Jason's sketch. Is that right?
You mean mine?
No, on my screen, I think it's
Correct.
Valerie's screen, and it's Jason.
Yeah, Jason Sutherland's.
Yeah. And I just texted it to you, Jay.
Okay. All right.
I really like this sketch. It's awesome.
Now, is this Austin's or Jason's?
Jason's.
When I just texted you is Jason's, and then I'm gonna send you Austin's in a moment.
Okay.
This is Jason. I'd say the last page probably a better sketch to look at, but that's just my opinion.
Oh yeah, okay, well, so Jason, I see yours, but yeah, did you have a chance to draw the arch, the barrel vaults? But that's pretty good.
Yeah, on the last page of the PDF. Should be able to see it.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just uploading Jason's, but okay, yeah, you have a very good freehand, excellent. Everything is but you've drawn before, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then Valerie, you're gonna show me Austin's, right? Okay, yeah, hold on. Okay, so Jason, that's your barrel vault? That's pretty good. Okay, very nice, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna give you some tricks on how to, draw the arches. There's a difference between we're all friends here. There's nothing personal, but I think a lot of my students, they do what's called can you guys see my drawing table again?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is not the, I mean, I can't move the camera around you can see my actual drawing table, but there's a difference between what's called sketching and scratching. I'd rather see people, because a lot of my students, they'll sketch like this to just do the line. But if you just practice freehanding parallel lines like this, like that's in your circles, what I just like to draw circles quickly with pencil like that. Then go back, cut those in half. So that way the lines are a little bit more continuous and smooth than kind of what you're showing on your sketch. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, I just like to lightly draw, just carefully, lightly draw curved circles like that. And then go back in and cut those in half. And then that becomes the arch like that. I like to just draw, because curves are difficult to freehand. I just like to draw the dot method where you kind of do this. It's like, where you measure. And then that'll give you some more guidance about properly continue the curves like that. And so who else had a question or? Okay, so who would like to see a 2-point quickly drawn before we leave today?
Yes.
Sure. Great.
Okay, yeah, and then I'll kind of, because we're gonna regroup for a second session on Thursday. Is that right, Valerie, for perspective part 2?
Yes, that'll be next Thursday.
Okay, so we've done the 1 point. What I would do is just practice. If you do the 1 point, draw the cube, then just imagine the vanishing point like this. Now the 2 point is a little bit different because the 1 point has one vanishing point. The 2 point has 2 vanishing points. The one on the left, and then the one on the right. So let's try to draw the cube. This is still the horizon line, still the eye level. Let's just draw a cube here in elevation. There's no distortion, no foreshortening, it's 90 degrees. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Let me redraw that. I'm still drawing 1 point. This is number 1 or 2. What I would do is just imagine the cube is roughly at the bottom of the paper. Then I would just go back and draw the edges first, then project back from the vanishing point. Can you guys see this?
Yeah, yeah.
So how would I draw the top of the cube? Would I just arbitrarily draw the square? No, because it's foreshortened. You'd go back to the vanishing point like that. The same thing with this one. So in other words, there's the cube. Now this is quite a bit more difficult to do than just the 1 point, as you can clearly see, because you really can't, the only thing you can measure in a 1 point is the elevation. You can't measure the distance at all like that. Okay, so let me draw something else. Vanishing point number 2, number 1. You know, this is still, you know, eye level. What I would do is, like, say if you wanted to draw an arched opening that's 10 feet tall, here's 5 feet, 10 feet, then I just would establish a center and draw the vanishing point here and then up to here. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry. I haven't drawn a 2-point perspective in a long time, but just bear with me for just a moment. Okay, so let's just kind of draw a small edicula. Okay, like that. So here's the cube, roughly about 10 feet tall. If this is the eye level, that's 5.5 or 5 feet, 5, 10 feet. Let's kind of draw an arch. Go back to the vanishing point. Go back to the vanishing point, establish the midpoint, and then draw the arch like that. Then just continue down. Okay, so how would I draw the thick walls to make this structurally sound? So to draw the thick wall, pretty much all the parallel lines will go back to the vanishing point here. The same thing with this one. You know, it is easy to kind of get lost in all the construction lines. Okay, so did everyone get that?
I've got I've got 1 arch.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's kind of put an eave or an overhang on this direction linear of this cube. Let's project it out from here. Project all the way back to the vanishing point. Here. Like that. I'm not expecting you to kind of draw this, but Okay, so let's take a look at this image. I know you probably are still working on it, but talk about the station point. I'm very close to the object because look how distorted this eve is. If you look at the plan diagram, here's the pavilion and plan. I'm just a few feet away from it. If I were to pull back, then the lines would have been a little bit more, gradual like this. So the 2-point perspective, you have to just be aware of the station point, how close you are to an object. These are some very, very basic rules. The art of drawing perspective is very, very complicated. There's a myriad of complexities to draw, especially the curve drawn that's foreshortened. So how far along are we on this one?
I think I got it.
Okay. Okay, so if you really want to master the art of drawing in perspective, let's talk about those curves for a moment before we leave. I just kind of briefly, you're just kind of sketching the curves by observation. There is a drawing technique to properly draw the curve that's foreshortened. So let's just take a look at this. So in elevation, the semicircle is half. So it occupies 2 squares. So here's 1 square. So what I like to do is, if you look at this carefully, take the diagonals, for example. What I'd like to do is divide the diagonal into thirds, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 for the midpoint. Then for the spring line, let's go ahead and just sketch that in your sketchbook. To properly draw this foreshortened, you can actually go back and do other subdivisions, divide this in half. Then measure this into thirds. Let me try to redo that. So then with these points, you just connect the dots with the curve like that. Then to make it more accurate, you could actually draw this into fourths.
Is the midpoint literally halfway between those 2 points?
This midpoint,
Yes, that one. So when you do it in down below, is it literally halfway between those 2, or is it a little closer to the back or a little closer to the front?
well, now you're talking about just the rectangle that's 2 squares.
Well, I know that midpoint is right in the middle, but when you project down to the 1-point perspective drawing, is the midpoint you put in there halfway between the
I mean,
front and the back?
This midpoint.
No, up at the top. Up at the, there, is that halfway between the back and the front?
Actually, that's a good question. No, because since it's distorted, you won't be able to divide this in half and equal. So this will be a little bit more to the right side. That's a good question, though. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, perfect.
Yeah, because, right. So then, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So what I would do is take these diagonals and divide them into fourths. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 points, 4 spaces. Then we'll be gradually able to draw the curve like that. Okay, let's kind of try that one last time before we go. So here is the arch I've been showing like that. You know, if you draw the diagonals, then that will give you the midpoint.
Whoa.
Yeah. Mhm. Yes, this actually, I haven't really taught people how to draw curves in a while, but I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not confusing everyone. You'll divide these into quarters.
Jason, did that answer your question?
Pardon
Yes,
me?
thank you.
You know, if you're doing a small sketch like this, you probably don't have room to just kind of graphically draw all those points like that. It just takes a matter of practice. Okay, well, it's 2:15. Any other questions or any other comments or something else you wanted to look at before we leave?
So Jason, if we wanted to pursue this further, you teach at UT Austin, is that correct?
I teach at UT Arlington Design Studios. Yeah, you have to be enrolled in the program to take the classes, but I do individual teaching lessons as well.
Okay.
Yeah. But then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about some more in-depth perspective exercises. So because on Tuesday, we'll be talking about some more shading and shadow and rendering techniques on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, it'll be more the perspective.
Great. So how many of these classes are we doing online here?
Valerie, do you have an answer for that? This is our first week to do this.
We have this kind of set up to where we're doing, the perspective class, the orthographic, and then we have follow-ups for those two classes. And depending upon if you guys like it or not, we were going to continue this kind of several times throughout the year until we worked through the classical curriculum and just go back and repeat it year after year.
I think this is fantastic.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear that.
I love it.
Oh, good.
It's also very helpful for beginners, total beginners. So we're in the real beginner class. So that was also very helpful.
Well, no, that's great. I think, part of this is when you start seeing the built world around you, have a much better appreciation. If you can see the image of San Francisco that I uploaded. Oh, hold on a minute. Hold on just a second. Okay, so you can see the street scene of San Francisco, right?
Yes.
Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, well, this is just a bear of a subject to start drawing. You can imagine, I mean, there's multiple vanishing points. The first thing to do, if you look at a complex subject, the first thing to do in any perspective is to figure out where the horizon line is. So the horizon line would be just roughly where all the lines are just exactly, you can see the bay windows, the cornice on that is exactly aligned with the horizon line. Then the second thing to do is figure out the vantage point. These all go back to one point at the end of the street. I think this is Telegraph Hill. You have to have another vantage point for just the street itself. Then the bay windows. I'll show you how to properly draw this on Thursday, but these are very complex perspectival studies to do. As beginners, it's always easier to start with one point, because I just showed you the magic of just conveying 3 dimensions in a flat plane with just a few marks is really extraordinary, I think. Now this is a 2-point. You can see clearly the 2 points. Has anyone actually been to Theater of Olympico? This is just a fascinating thing to see.
No.
No.
Extraordinary. It's right. It's in Vincennes. It's relatively one of Palladio's obscure. I think it's one of his most fantastic projects, because he's actually building the streets as these perspective scenes. Actually mind-blowing to actually go in there and see this, because what's funny is the floor is actually sloped. There used to be a little guy that operated the theater. He would walk in here and all his head would be way above the cornices, because they're actually building a very tapering street. It's really it just kind of blows your mind and imagination that these are built like this. This is absolutely magical, the way these are built. So not only are they tapering in plan, they're actually tapering in section. I'll show you, I'll do a quick sketch for you. Can you guys still see the drawing table?
Yes.
Yeah, this is definitely not to be missed. So if this is the cross section, the proscenium arch across the stage is here with the classical orders, the sculptures. So the corners are actually sloped like this. Here's the arch. The buildings are actually built obliquely like this. So if I'm sitting on the seats up here, I can see but at one point it looks like it's actually a long street, but if you walk around it, you can see that the street, it's kind of like a fun house. You guys ever been to Casa Magnetica and Six Flags?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
No.
It's exactly like it's built as a literal perspective box. The street is slow, but from one point it looks like it's flat. When you start walking around, like all the arches are built obliquely like this, like that. It's kind of just a mind-blowing experience to even see that. And when this was first, can you still see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. You can still see that now?
Yes.
Now, when this thing was first, this was built in the Renaissance. They didn't have electricity or gas, so this was all candle powered. There's a wonderful video on YouTube where you used to be able to see the sconces for the candles. So at night, if you went to a performance or a theater, then this would all be illuminated by candlelight. Just an absolutely extraordinary building and a place to even be. Much less, who cares about the performance? I just was fascinated at just the candle-powered sconces and just the architecture itself. Now, this is probably wood and plaster. This is not marble at all, but okay, so we saw some pretty exciting stuff, right? It's just in history, it's amazing to think that the ancient Pompeians already knew how to draw a linear perspective. It was only because in the 1700s they removed some of the volcanic ash, and you could see that they already figured it out. Because in the 1400s, Brunelleschi, I mean, of course he was a genius, but for somebody to visually figure this out and actually change the world of arts and visuals was just phenomenal. We wouldn't be able to draw like this if it weren't for Brunelleschi. And that's just part of his accomplishments. He was responsible for completing this incredible dome, a major engineering feat. Not only was an artist and architect, he was an engineer. Yeah, it's just extraordinary. And interesting that Filippo Brunelleschi looked like this street urchin homeless. But if you read Ross King's book on Brunelleschi's dome, they talk about his sort of personality, his presence in Florence. Is that a lot of people thought he was a homeless person, he was a bum because he didn't groom himself. He was just completely obsessed with architecture, didn't care. And so when people realized that he's the one that's building the dome, they were completely dumbfounded. He was a very humble individual, but suppressing sort of any sort of intellectual thought at this time. And this is just one of his projects. You can see his linear perspective is actually built as a perspective. I mean, it's not literally a perspective vault, but you can see his understanding of perspective just by the way the nave is elongated by the nature of that elongation in the sanctuary. Yeah, there's one writer that put perspective and grandeur as this wonderful, I think he said that the world of grandeur is all just an illusion. I thought that was interesting. Because in drawing on paper, it's just an illusion. It's not a real three-dimensional image. It's simply a sketch on paper. This is, late Troy, this is 1700s engraver around the time of Piranesi, but it's interesting. They play tricks on your eyes because the building is not quite this big. I was saying earlier is that the people are deliberately drawing shorter to make this space look bigger.
This reminds me of the pageant of the masters where they recreate all those masterful artworks on stage in Laguna Beach.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Same kind of concept as that theater that you pointed out, but they literally take 100 paintings and recreate them with live people and frames, and they all are in place. And when they open the curtain, it looks exactly like the painting. It's pretty fun.
I have to see that. I've never seen that. Yeah. I was going to show you one other thing. Somebody was asking me, can you see the Frank Lloyd house? This is the Martin house.
Mm-hmm.
Before we leave, I know it's already 2:20, but I think it's important to see that. I was going to Google some images. If you haven't had a chance, I know it's not a classical building, but the power of Wright's perspectives comes into play in his architecture. The same thing with Brunelleschi. I'm going to show you this real quick, and then we'll leave.
Hey Jay, I am now back. I had connection issues.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think I'm just going to show them the Martin house quickly, and then I think we'll hopefully go back to your sketchbook. Let me see. Can you guys see the Google images at all?
No.
Okay, let me, oh, my sharing is possible in just a moment. Okay, just a second. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to show you, this entry sequence is just phenomenal. When you open the front door, Wow, look at that pergola.
Can you maximize that screen?
Yes, let me see if I can do that. This is as far as can you see, can you actually see these? These are small images. But you know, I know it's not a classical building, but my gosh, the power of this corridor that connects the main house to the gardener's cottage is extraordinary. Frank Lloyd Wright loved to draw. He just built every line on the building.
Hmm.
So then ultimately, when you walk through the pergola, you get this extraordinary view of the sculpture. Let me go back in and see if I can. I used to have a PDF of this project, but I don't. So look what happens when you walk all the way down that probably 100-foot corridor, is that you get this extraordinary sculpture at the very, if you actually look at the floor plan, there's a huge vista that has a framed view of the sculpture. Absolutely magnificent.
Very cool.
So, you know, I like to show Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings and buildings because they're easy for students to draw because you're not worrying about arches or the decorative orders. So for beginning students, these houses are extremely orthogonal. So it's very, you know, easy and somewhat challenging for students to draw perspectives just by his you know, imagery and architecture. And this is a very unflattering picture of the facades. The stained glass windows completely been redone, thank God. But
Very cool.
yeah, this is actually the front procession of the front entry. This is actually, the front door is tucked on the left. It's like a little Japanese garden where it's hard to find the front door. That's what's fascinating about his projects. And then also, I think we'll go ahead and leave. You can follow me on Instagram. There's a lot of perspectives. I love to drop, I just make a career out of drawing perspectives all the time. It's Cantrell 1884. What I'm showing you is there's a really wonderful little pub, Scarlet Pumpernickel, that has all of these murals in downtown Dallas on Main Street. It's quite a treat to go in there. I would encourage people to stop by and see these images.
That's your Instagram?
Yes, it's Cantrell 1884.
1884, okay.
Okay, any closing suggestions or questions or?
Jason, are you an architect? I don't remember reading your bio.
Well, I do mostly I haven't finished my licensing exams, but I do mostly residential design work for builders. I work for Bob Clark and for Jerry Stark Construction.
Yeah, I know Jerry. I'm a builder.
Oh, great, yeah. And then his son Taylor took over the business, so I do a lot of work for Taylor Stark.
You know.
I'm not sure if you've met him before.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah, and then, you know, they both have a great sense of humor. I like working with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got my internship with Ralph Dusing for about 10 years. I just think he's probably one of the best architects around. He can draw like you would believe, paints. His, you know, philosophy of classical architecture is great. He's just a nice guy.
That's wonderful.
I'm looking at your Instagram, very inspiring.
Oh, and who was this again?
Suzanne.
Oh yeah, Suzanne. Okay, great. Yeah. Yes, you know, I live in downtown. I do walking tours, and I just love to show, you know, people these extraordinary buildings that, you know, you can't appreciate them driving by or just when you're texting on your phone in downtown. But thank you. I appreciate that.
This has been fascinating for me. I look forward to the future classes.
Oh, good. Well,
Yes, thank you very much.
you're welcome. I'll see you Tuesday and Thursday then.
Sounds
Perfect.
good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.